Hey, I'm Harry from Umbra, and I'm here in London today with Elliot and Ben from Somfy. We have a great opportunity to have a chat about shading, and we want to do some myth busting around some of the common misconceptions about automated shading. So, Elliot, just tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Good morning, I'm Elliot. I'm head of projects for Somfy in the UK and Ireland. So my role is to look after the projects division, business line in the UK and Ireland, and that's focused purely on commercial projects and looking at automation and how we automate solar shading.
Cool, great. And Ben, what's your role?
Hello everyone, so I am Ben Vowles, the Head of Specification at Somfy Projects for the UK and Ireland. So my role is typically working with architects, designers and consultants to really validate, prove and discuss the tangible benefits around dynamic shading and what it brings to buildings, but also what it means for occupants who live and work within the structures that we collaborate on.
Cool, okay, great. Thank you very much for coming, by the way, guys, really appreciate it. So, let's jump straight into the first really top level thing that I think people often get wrong about shading and automated shading in particular. So, Elliot, we hear this all the time, right? Is automated shading / electric blinds, motorized blinds, whatever you want to call them, is it just a gimmick? Is it just a cool thing to have, or is there some actual tangible value?
It's a good question. It's a good question to start with, and it's probably going to spark lots of conversation for sure.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours, right?
We could do.
So what's the condensed thing?
Yeah, so the condensed thing is it's definitely not a gimmick. And Ben touched on it beautifully there in the introduction, that as part of his role is to validate it. There's massive benefits for the building and for the occupants in the building, and we always look at those two key things, and I'm sure we'll dive more into detail on how we validate and also the benefits there. It is cool as well, and I think that shouldn't be forgotten about, because we're in an age where technology is so important and it's so key to the built environment that we live and work in, and it plays a part to that. There are many myths, and we come up against them on our day-to-day job, and it's for us at Somfy and messages that you guys and other people in the industry are pushing out is to challenge that so we can better educate. But for sure, it's not just a gimmick. There are some real tangible benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a company like Somfy and, dare I say it, even our competitors wouldn't exist in today's world if it was a gimmick. I think the fact that automation is on the rise and has been for some time, for me that really echoes that people are starting to understand the tangible benefits around dynamic or automated shading. So the fact that it is on the rise is a positive, and I think more and more people are starting to understand the benefits that it has on buildings and occupants as well.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I think there is a gimmick element to it, in the sense that, like, it's particularly in your home, right? Do you have electric blinds?
I do.
Good.
I have to be an advocate of that.
Yeah,
right?
Of course you do. But like, do you like showing people, right?
Yeah.
People come and they're interested. Oh, what are these? These come down by themselves. So there is that kind of cool factor, yeah.
For sure, and it's I have a very basic smart home, but it's Alexa, blinds down, lights on, or whatever the mix might be, right? And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I speak to my friends who work in totally different industries, and they'd be like, "What, really? Like, what is it?
Automated blinds?
Is it even a thing?"
Yeah.
And that's very simple, right? That's really on a basic level, and I think that's maybe the first myth we go into is that it doesn't have to be that complex, even in a commercial environment.
Yeah. There are almost like two really top level things, I think, where automated shading plays a real difference, and one of those has to be the energy efficiency side, right? And obviously all the related savings, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But then there's also the well-being side and how it impacts, well, the occupants of the building.
Ben can go into good detail about this, because it's his day to day and it's being asked all the time. But yeah, the energy efficient is so important, and that's, I guess, where we would start, right? Really early on a project or a concept to look at that energy piece.
tell us about the tool that Somfy have developed. This is pretty new, okay?
Yeah, it is. It's new, it's exciting, and it's a fantastic innovation to, I use the word quite frequently, validate the benefits around what dynamic shading brings to the building performance. So we'll talk and we'll expand on the benefits around the occupants in terms of their health, well-being, productivity. But if we look at that energy piece in terms of the building efficiency, so the tool can model based on factual specific data of the building, so the orientation, the glazing specification, the fabric, the textile, the product that's used, whether it's external, whether it's internal, and it models the building to show the benefits of things like energy consumption, CO2 emissions reduction, overheating. There's various calculations and various reporting that it can generate to say, right, here is for all of the key stakeholders of the building or the project, here are the tangible benefits. Here is your investment, because for sure it's an elephant in the room. We have to discuss it. Is that initial uplift of CapEx, but here is your return on investment, and that's really, really important. And I think historically the industry hasn't been in a position to provide this sort of early data, and we're in a great position to be able to do so.
It's super important though, isn't it? Because like we all know, and I think there's loads of designers, architects, engineers out there who know in their mind that blinds have an impact on the energy efficiency of a building, but what you're talking about is making that into real data. Absolutely. And being able to prove that this is the impact it has, yeah?
That's been the key, right? And where we've launched the tool and we've been having early conversations, and actually before we launched it, I mean, Ben came on board to Somfy almost about a year ago now, and the tool was just about to be launched. And the early conversations that we were having were, great, I get it, I understand it, I get the benefit, but there's someone in this chain of the project that is investing the money. Now, they want to know where that money's being spent. And that would be the question. Show us, demonstrate to us. That's, for me, is the biggest benefit, in that we understand it and the industry understands it. Now we can go, here's exactly where you're going to make your savings. Yeah. And that's both at OPEX and, of course, CapEx level.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that what we are seeing, we've seen a shift, certainly, in the consultants and the architects, in that it can help make savings on other services as well, which is really important. You know, when we're looking at heating and cooling strategies, we can play a part in that, and we should. We've got great products across the industry.
So, for anybody who doesn't know, what and why do blinds have an impact on the energy efficiency of a building? You know, it's just, I suppose to some of us who talk about it all day, every day, it's obvious, but just what's the impact?
I think simply it's all about, for us, it's reducing solar gain, reducing unwanted solar gain, which in turn is going to have an impact on reducing the demand for things like air conditioning. Equally, there's seasonal challenges, and I think this is something that is often overlooked. So the summertime, we know it's all about reducing the demand on air conditioning, reducing unwanted solar gain, which shading does to, you know, very, very good effect. But equally in the winter, there is an opportunity to reduce the demand on heating the building, and for me it's a strategy that I think often goes overlooked quite consistently. Actually harnessing the sun as a free resource of energy, and harnessing the sun to actually bring heat into the building, certainly during, you know, unoccupied hours, great opportunity to then reduce or lessen the demand on heating. So it's, for me, that's where dynamic shading really comes into its own, the benefits around automation, dealing with those seasonal challenges. And that's really simple terms in terms of what the basics, the fundamentals of what dynamic or automated shading does.
I think it's making sure the blind's in the right position, right?
We've got exactly the crux of what we're talking about, right?
You know, there's some great fabrics on the market, etc., which of course do a great job, but ultimately you could have the best type of fabric on a blind. If the blind isn't in the position it needs to be on that given moment, it's ineffective.
Did you pinch that line from me? That's what I always
say. We did. It's something that I actually took from one of your previous presentations, and it's absolutely factual, and it's spot on. You could spend so much time, effort and money and capital on the performance of that fabric, but if it's not put in the right position at the right time, literally reading from your script, but if it's not put in the right position at the right time, it's a missed opportunity, it's a moot point.
Yeah. and I think you might have edited that a bit, because I always say, like, you might as well have toilet roll hanging in your window. If your toilet roll was automated in your window, it'd be doing a better job than that really high performance fabric, right? Because it'd be in the right place at the right time. But obviously we don't want people doing that. You know, we want to sell the right fabrics as well. So that perhaps brings us quite nicely onto the well-being side of why automated shading is important.
It's the second part that we always look at, you know, and it's equally as important as the energy part for us. And Ben, I'm sure, can touch a bit more on how the tool that we've just been talking about takes that into consideration. I think that for me, when we're looking at well-being, it's encouraging natural light into the building. I think there's sometimes a misconception that shading tries just to block light, which isn't the case. If actually we want to promote the other way and let natural light into the building.
Daylight harvesting at the end of the day, isn't it? It's trying to maximise daylight.
This is it. And again, that moves back to that point of automation, in the sense that it needs to change throughout the day, so that you can maximise the ability that natural light gives that building across the whole day, dependent on the season, dependent on the conditions of the day. Focusing on that occupant that's working from a commercial perspective or living in that space. The tool looks at that quite concisely, I guess, Ben?
Yeah, it looks at it in a very concise, in-depth manner, and it's really all about access to natural light. We know that has a positive impact on well-being, but also things like productivity. So the tool is very, very good for the commercial office, the commercial workplace, to understand the impact that daylight has on its occupants. So we're in a prime scenario now where we've got fantastic views out of over London. We want the shading in a retracted position to maximise daylight, because the sun is not engaging the area that we're sitting in. So that's the whole premise about dynamic shading. And
we get to look around London all the time, don't we? Like, I mean, if we look at this window, I can see half a dozen buildings where there's no direct sunlight, but the blinds are down. And so maybe they're hosting a presentation or something, but we've been sat here all morning, they've had their blinds down literally all day. But it's probably because someone last night maybe closed them on a chain, and they're still down now, because at the end of the day, the LED lighting in the workplace will compensate for it, right? It'll get brighter, it'll make you feel, yeah, this is fine. But there's another energy saving, right?
Exactly. Yes. And going back to the point about the well-being and productivity part, so the tool models the influence possibilities of things like glare, overheating, and the negative impact that this can have on the occupant. Now, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of science that has gone into the tool. It's been co-collaborated with and co-developed with a daylight and building physics expert, so that we can actually understand and really understand the impact that daylight and overheating challenges and glare has on occupants. So effectively the tool models this to show that if you're putting the blinds in the right position at the right time, but more importantly retracting it when it's not needed, it can have a positive impact on productivity and well-being. Excuse me. And the tool models that to actually give a tangible set of data points to say, right, if you can increase productivity by a small percentage, actually it has a huge potential return on investment.
I think that's something that maybe, personally, at the start we were like, how's that going to go into the market, right? Because there could be an argument to say, well, it's quite fluffy, productivity. Yet we've all been in scenarios where we've maybe had a headache at work, or you're in, and normally it's the environment, right, that has potentially made that worse. When it looks at productivity, it's based on JLL's 300, is that right? That looks at the different expenditures for a business. Obviously, the biggest cost being your people. And we know, you take London, very competitive market, people want the top talent. There's a big investment that goes into getting someone in the door. So businesses want those people to be productive. Now, if we can help improve that based on the data set by a few percent, it can make a huge difference. It can make a difference to that business's bottom line and the way that they operate by doing something what we would say is quite simple. And so there's huge benefits, and I think that kind of ties that piece really nicely, because we're pitching this and saying, look, it's also there for your client. So who's designing the building, who's investing in it? There's that whole circle there of, we're thinking about your building that you're going to be leasing, but we're also thinking about the staff that are occupying that space.
And it's enabling people to market their space as a best-in-class workspace. And there's a lot of there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of focus around developers providing this best-in-class workspace. Well, if you've not got the right access to natural light, if you've got a building that isn't energy efficient, that's not best-in-class workspace. So we have a huge, substantial contribution towards that.
We'll talk specific about London. 85-90% of our work that we do at Somfy Projects is in London, so I'd say we're quite well versed in this city. I'd say there's some exceptional buildings and buildings that have been delivered and developed to the highest standards, and what we have seen certainly over the last 2 years is regulations changing and developing, and actually what's really nice to see is we're being held as part of a supply chain accountable for that. So the questioning and the level of detail is certainly increased in my time in construction, of where our products come from, the journey, what they're going to do when they're in situ in the building. There's some great developers at the moment in the city, and contractors as well, who are meeting those standards, and I would also say challenging, going above and beyond. So I would certainly say that there's a big focus on that, which is good to see.
It is, and I think just also to add to that point, we're seeing a lot of future pipeline developments, a lot of future projects with a lot of conversations and aspirations about having dynamic shading as part of that base build, which is a hugely positive thing, because for me, people are starting to understand the benefits as to why it should go in at base build, and the fact that we're seeing that as part of planning for a lot of these projects is a huge positive.
But do you think that at the end of the day, it is kind of being forced on us by government, right, in terms of the whole net zero journey? So people are we need to do it, and we need to be building buildings that are going to be contributing to meeting those standards. There's also obviously a lot of buildings out there that are already built that need to be brought up to standards.
Absolutely, yeah.
But let's just talk briefly about EPDs, environmental product declarations, because I think that is, whilst that is essentially data on a page, it actually helps us, it helps the contractor, it helps landlords prove and validate what they're putting into their buildings. And obviously Somfy have your Eco Passport, and you actually have a ton of products that already have EPDs.
Yes, yeah. I think it's an important point. There's two things for me here. So first of all, having the data is extremely important. It's required by a lot of projects, a lot of regulations are driving the requirement for EPDs, which is a positive thing. But I also think going forward is understanding that data in terms of, okay, you have gone to the effort of full transparency of the materials that make up your product, but what does that data mean? I think we're going to be heading to a point in the future where actually the data measurement in terms of the embodied carbon is actually going to be looked at quite closely.
Yeah, and I think that's, you're right, we've made good progress as a business, and as it's important as an industry we do, because we're just part of a product, right? And you need to have that for the fabric, etc., that's making up that full product. I think that it's a journey, right? And everyone's going on that journey. I'm really proud actually of the work we've done in our business, because
Somfy are quite well ahead of the game, right, on that embodied carbon journey.
We are, and certainly, and it's really interesting actually, because I look after part of a culture piece across the UK business, and as a management team, we were focusing on, right, well, how can we really conceptualise that for the UK? I want to maybe sit in front of someone and say, well, this is how we're contributing to this wider piece. And we actually had a meeting with an external consultant, contacts that we had in the UK, and they were really surprised at how advanced we were. And it was great to hear that, that's maybe the benefits of working for a big global company, but we're translating that now on a local level. So very simple, for example, for this year, we're tracking all of our travel. So today's journey for myself and Ben will be tracked, if people are flying, etc. And it's having that understanding, but I think also the responsibility onto the people that work within the business to help contribute to that, know what our products do, and when we're discussing projects, have that level of information and data, because you make a really interesting point, Harry, and I think that people aren't necessarily considering shading when they're looking at these buildings. And that's the missing piece.
Correct.
And there'll be other products within that building that get them to that stage of a smart building or energy neutral, etc. We as an industry, and hopefully as Somfy and Umbra as leaders in that industry, need to push the message, because if we do, we can help.
Yeah,
you know,
we have to raise awareness, don't we?
100%. And we've got a free natural resource, and I say that so much that it's there, and it's you go to Europe and it's considered. Now it's a different market, but it is considered.
And we spend so much time actually thinking about our lighting, our artificial lighting or LED lighting, whatever you want to call it, and even talking about human-centric lighting. But human-centric lighting has to involve your biggest light resource, right? Which is coming through these windows here. If you're not controlling that, then all your lighting design in here almost becomes redundant, because it can be wiped out by a sunny day.
If you're considering intelligent lighting, we need to consider intelligent shading. It's a given.
I think it's the same thing, isn't it? Intelligent lighting, shading is part of intelligent lighting. The two have to talk to each other.
I think that's also the thing. I think it's considered, but then maybe it becomes deemed too expensive, or where the product sits in terms of the timescale of the project isn't always the most beneficial in terms of when you're looking at cost savings, etc. So I think that's it, and that's, you know, what we talked about earlier in terms of the tool and all the benefits. It's also being quite transparent and showing what the costs look like, because I think that's really important, because I think people think automation is really, really expensive, and that is a big challenge that we have to overcome.
That's the other myth, right? Is like you want to bring your building up to standard. Shading is actually one of the lower cost items compared to replacing all your boilers, putting in solar energy sources. Like, those are actually big ticket items, and I'm not writing them off because they're important, okay? But shading in the context of that is actually a big impact, low cost thing you can do.
A really interesting point, and a colleague of ours in Holland fairly recently mentioned to me as a passing comment that he was talking to a consultant local to where he's based, and by using a dynamic shading strategy with the correct type of blind system, the designer or consultant was actually able to reduce the amount of air conditioning that was required for the project. They downgraded from a large unit down to a smaller, and that was a capital saving of €80,000 for that one particular area. We need more data on this. We need more conversations around the impact that shading has on things like air conditioning and heating. It's a huge part.
It has a huge impact, and I think that's exactly the point, is this term of passive cooling. That is what shading can do for you. It's fair to say that what we've just spoken about really does add some weight to the fact that dynamic automated shading is not just a gimmick. It's not just there just to be cool. It is cool, but it's not there just to do that. It brings a lot of other tangible benefits.
I think there's one other point that we've not spoken about, which is another opportunity. It's another benefit of dynamic and automated shading. Light pollution. We are seeing a huge increase, a huge trend in the amount of buildings that are requiring to deploy shading to reduce light pollution. In turn, that can increase biodiversity, increase wildlife to the area, or encourage wildlife to the area.
This is the dark skies planning thing,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It's a planning policy in for some areas, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's something that's probably or possibly not focused on enough around bringing the benefits of, you know, reducing light pollution for buildings, what it can do for the surrounding environment. It's actually one of the key drivers for automation at the moment.
Yeah, and I've heard the term good neighbours scheme as well, in terms of, you know, if you've got all the lights on here and you've got, you know, we've got some residential dwellings down there, you know, do they really want to be bathed in artificial light all night? Probably not. So that's, you know, yet another reason to have your dynamic automated shading. So we have another myth to bust: wired versus wireless. So this is, I can already hear people going, oh no, not this one, you know, wired is always better. And I do agree, you know, if you can get a wire there, do it wired, yeah? But Elliot, why do we have to consider wireless, and why is it important that, just to start off with, let's not delve into like the two, one versus the other, but why do we have to consider wireless?
It's a good question. It's one that we get asked quite a bit. I think that, and we mentioned technology earlier in the conversation, right? And I think technology is evolving. A lot of other services are becoming wireless. So there's a trend, there's a pattern there. I think most importantly, if we just take a step back and look at the environment in terms of the built environment at the moment, and specifically, let's look at London. We know there's a big challenge now and also on the horizon in terms of the building stock. It's 2030 in terms of where buildings have to get up to a certain standard to go from up to a B. And a lot of them are at C and D at the moment. I think it's around, the figure would have changed slightly, but reports from SAL was around 80%, maybe higher of the current building stock isn't there. So you've got these assets that, and I've heard the term coined, stranded assets that could be apparent by 2030. So there's a big retrofit agenda. And that, for me, creates an opportunity or creates an importance for a wireless system.
And I think you touch on a very good point, Elliot, about the retrofit market. It's not always possible to physically run cables. Look at a listed building, for example. That it's a prime example of difficulty to actually chase cables to a blind. So actually having the ability and the solutions to run or to provide a wireless solution is that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, and that might be fully wireless, so it might be battery powered and wireless control, or it might be that you can get power there because often you've got a socket ring or you've got something where you could tap into more easily, but then it's hard maybe to get control cabling there. So you might have mains power but wireless control. So it's really important to be able to have that sort of mix, isn't it?
Yes, that flexibility. Yeah.
But then if we look at the wired versus wireless argument, I think there's probably perhaps a bit of a misconception that we've come from perhaps an era of rather flaky wireless technology to an era where wireless technology is actually pretty good these days. I mean, at the end of the day, look at this space. This is a premium space, and everyone's using laptops and phones, and they're connected to the internet seamlessly. You're streaming. You can stream videos. You can do whatever wirelessly. Well, if you can do that, you can certainly control a blind a couple of times a day, can't you?
Yeah, 100%.
I think there's that misconception there.
Yeah, there is, and it takes time to get to that stage. You're 100% right, and we've seen that in other services for sure. The development of wireless products in the commercial space, also in the home environment for sure. And I think that now seems to be the time where shading's also getting products that can do that and can deliver to that. I think there's always you want to be fail-safe in a commercial environment. We get that a lot when we're looking at early conception projects. It needs to do what it's set out to do, of course, right? So there's that, and I think there's that maybe still a bit of hesitancy on wireless, and that's for manufacturers like ourselves to prove that the products are good, that they work as they're designed to do.
So perhaps we should touch on Animeo Suite.
Yeah,
we talk a little bit about that.
We've got Animeo Suite, which is soft launching at the moment. I'm sure Ben will touch more on it in a second. It's a great product. It's been developed for a period of years and really robust. So I've been at Somfy 4 and a bit years. When I joined, it was in the making. So it's been really thoughtfully developed, tested, engineered, etc., which is great, because if we're putting a product into the market that is innovative and is leading, it's got to work, right? That's really key. So as I said, it's soft launching at the moment. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, we're super excited. I guess the first instance, it is being rolled out on a small to medium sized scale. So for now, maximum of 200 motors, which for me is still actually quite a sizable amount of, it's a sizable amount of motors to control.
And in that retrofit piece, that's perfect.
That fits in nicely.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think realistically, it's all about scaling back the amount of cabling that's required, but it's also providing a service-ready ecosystem where enables the customer to specify, to select, to quote, and also to project manage a project in terms of that reporting, in terms of that maintenance element. So it's going to be a huge benefit to be able to do this as one solution. In terms of the cabling, there's various options. So initially it's going to be launched with IO motors. That will progress hopefully to in due course to Zigbee motors, but it's effectively stripping back a lot of that cabling element that goes into a project, and we're super excited for it.
I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that when part of that stripping back cabling is not that the cabling is necessarily expensive, obviously it is on a big scale, but it's more a case of, I think one of the hold-ups or hesitancies with automated shading, or even just motorised, not even necessarily automated, is the amount of different people that need to be involved. So unless as an installer, a blinds installer, you're able to provide the whole package, then you have to work with all the other trades and services. You've got to get your electricians and your M&Es involved, which even if you can provide the whole package, you still have to, because you're still going to have to work with the infrastructure they've got there. But if you can remove a big chunk of that, you're stripping out cost, you're stripping out time, you're stripping out any risk of people getting the wrong end of the stick, or not reading the plans right, or running the wrong cables to the wrong places, and you remove a whole, well, I was going to say layer, but it's multiple layers actually, of potential problems and costs, don't you?
It is, and it's about making it more accessible, which is really important, and then being able to put those benefits that we've talked about earlier into practice on a wider scale. When I mean wider, I mean more buildings.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also maybe a myth and a bugbear of mine, is that you see a lot of automation on big scale, big size buildings. Great, happy days. But also, same people working in a smaller space that equally can benefit from that. And so I think it will open some really good opportunities for there. I think it's got good scalability, and that will take time, right? There's, years worth of development have gone into it here. It will continue to develop and evolve and get that level of connectivity that's required. That takes time.
Yeah, and I think that probably brings us quite nicely onto the automation piece of that. When we're talking about automated shading, that's very different to motorised or electric blinds, yeah? Motorised shading sometimes can actually almost be classed as manual, right? If you've got to press a button to make it go up or down, and that's the only way of controlling that blind, then that's really manual shading. It might have power to it, it might be motorised. Automated shading is the next level, but it doesn't need to be complicated, does it?
I think it's fair to say that there are, for every project, you can actually tailor it to what the project requires. There's various options in terms of how you want the area or the room or the building to be controlled. Typically what we would do, if we had sort of carte blanche on a project, we take data from a weather station. That is monitoring sky conditions in real time. So it's monitoring things like solar radiation, it's monitoring lux levels, and once a particular threshold has been achieved, it will send the command down the network to say the blinds need to deploy based on external environmental conditions. To scale that back, you can actually have something as very simple as local timers, dusk till dawn. You could even have a number of internal sensors, whether that's a temperature sensor, whether that's an air quality sensor, for example, to work in conjunction with natural ventilation. There's a number of ways of doing it, and effectively it tailors it to how you want the building to operate. What's the key driver?
I think that's a really interesting point as well, that every project's different and every building's different. And I think that's where automation is so great, that it has that flexibility. So yes, it could just be a simple timer, right? I want the blinds to deploy in the morning and in the evening. Yeah. And great, you can do that. We would always then try and leave something as a potential bolt-on, so that if they wanted to add some environmental sensors, etc., they've got that flexibility. Or you could go right down the other line where it's, well, we need it really zonal. We need to take shadow into consideration because we've got built up other buildings around us. We want to track the sun's path around the building. We want to have remote access. It all needs to be in the cloud. But actually that real level of just entry point is also really good for the building. We should never forget that. And when we go into those conversations, either with experts in the industry or consultants or architects, that's really clear. It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing.
You don't need to overcomplicate it.
You don't.
There's so many different levels and layers to what automation is or can do.
And I think this is why some people perhaps maybe afraid to offer it, because of the mindset of automated blinds is complicated. Therefore, it's simpler not to do it. It's not the case, is it? It doesn't need to be complicated, and you can start with your base level, like you say, start with some basic timers, some basic light sensors, and then potentially add on, or it'll work fine like that for years.
I would definitely like to raise a point and really address the elephant in the room to the industry, but also to the built environment as well. There needs to be a shift and a change in mindset in terms of the way that shading is specified. We know that manual shading is not doing what it's supposed to do for the building, and our industry, I think, really needs to get out of the habit and the mindset of we just put a manual blind in because it's what we've always done. And that applies to, you know, the built environment in general. The amount of conversations that I have on a daily or weekly basis to talk with architects, to talk to developers, consultants, they say, we're just going to put manual shading in because it's what we've always done, or it's what our simulations say, that when the blind is down, this is meeting the simulations and the calculations we've ran for the building. We need to get out of that mindset.
You can't leave it to the user of the building, can you?
You just can't, because it relies on that occupant controlling the blind correctly. And we have data, we have case studies to show how occupants use their blinds. It's very reactive, and typically it's minimal movements. It's pulled down to a particular level and it gets left there throughout the rest of the day or even the rest of the week.
And we know that as humans, right? Because you just take a scenario in the day, right, and you get distracted. You know, you might put the blind down because you've got glare early morning.
Call to a meeting.
Then you got your coffee, then you're into another Teams meeting, and before you know it, it's dark outside. I'm probably giving a winter scenario here, right? And with all that good stuff we talked about in terms of daylight harvesting, you've missed. Now, that's not saying that we need to take control away totally for the user. We'd always promote the opportunity to override.
Yeah,
of
must
course.
have local control.
Of course, but it's getting that mind and that shift. And I've said this before, we firmly believe, and we're trying to do that at Somfy, push that message out, because it is challenging, and we get it right from many of the industry leaders. The guys in Somfy Projects have sat in those seats. We've all come from that side, right?
Yeah, for sure. I've done it.
It's difficult because if you're sitting in front of a customer that's potentially got a big order for you, you're going to put the options on the table, and we would blame someone for doing that, right? But it's just trying to get, and that's almost our biggest competitor, is the manual product. You know,
I think the problem is, in a way, like the problem we see is there's when you're in a space, there's this discomfort trigger to put the blinds down, isn't there? If it's too bright, you'll put your blinds down, but there is no discomfort trigger to put your blinds up, and that's why you can look around London and there's all these offices. I can see them behind you, Ben. There's buildings over there. The blinds are down and the sun's not even on it, but it probably was this morning. So they probably put their blinds down when the sun was in their eyes, but now they don't put them up again. So now their heating and their lighting is all working harder to compensate.
This is it, and you take maybe like a winter scenario, for example, and you've got some great buildings in this city where the views are absolutely phenomenal. And we know that we're in a very digital age, and if it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen. And so likely in the winter scenario, for example, blinds might go up to get lovely pictures of the London skyline at night. Now with automation, when the person's finished doing that, your blind will reset. And okay, you may have lost some of the heat that you want it to keep in, but it's still doing its effect, because overnight you're protecting that.
Yeah, it's still a lot better than it being up all night, right?
Now you could put a message out, well, all blinds have to be dropped at the end of the day, but realistically, it's just never gonna.
No one's gonna do it.
It's never gonna happen. Yeah. So I think that that's really important, that the messaging's right. And you're right, as an industry, we do have a responsibility, because if we can create that, it creates better buildings for the building and for the people. It also creates better opportunities for people, and it puts more of a emphasis on the project, the value of that project as well, of how people can do business, grow their businesses, and hopefully improve their bottom lines, because people are in it to do good business, which is what we're all here to do, right? And I think for us, that's addressing some of the challenges, and we've spoken about that today, but it's having some data to show what the cost is, what the return on investment is, and the difference. Okay, you can have a manual product and it's going to cost you X, but you're not going to get the benefits, and the investment is here. And if we can close that gap, then even at an entry level, that starts to become the norm, and that's a big challenge. We're seeing that shift, and there are some great companies in the industry who are helping that journey, helping that messaging.
The shading has such a huge knock-on effect in terms of that overall building performance, and for me it has to be addressed earlier, it has to be considered earlier. And again, that shift is happening. Shading is starting to become more of an integral part of building design, which is a great thing. But unfortunately, there are still, some projects that shading is considered too late, and it's that missed opportunity. So I think probably a big portion of my week or my day-to-day role is that education piece, to really create the message and have the conversations around, consider this early because of X and Y. Here are the benefits. This is what it can do. And again, I think perhaps the industry has had a lack of data, a lack of case studies to say, there you go, this is it. Actually, this is a live building. This is the contribution. And I think it's an exciting time to be doing what we do collectively, because I think we are starting to get some great data, some great evidence to say, there you go, this is why you should consider it far, far earlier.
Obviously, we've known you guys and worked with you for quite a long time. We appreciate your support.
Likewise. Yeah.
We work closely together.
Yeah, it's great to work in close collaboration with Umbra across a number of different levels. I think that the one thing we've seen since having Ben on board and really focusing on going out and getting these specifications is that controls and motors are obviously just part of a finished product, and we obviously have someone in Ben that has great knowledge and experience in terms of the system, which is so beneficial. But having a partner like Umbra who can really help us advise on system types, fabrics, developments. We take like the Evolve system, a new development to the market, giving us that opportunity that when we're writing something that's going to benefit the whole market, that we're supported. I think that's really beneficial, isn't it, Ben?
Absolutely. And perhaps Somfy are a little bit out of the loop in terms of product developments, as you've explained. So actually working with you guys keeping us up to date with latest developments, new products, new textiles, really, really important.
Well, it's a complete system, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
You've got the whole automation piece, and then you've got the actual finished blind that people see. And then you've got the delivery piece to site as well. So obviously all those partners are really important to back to the collaboration thing. Super important to have those conversations, involve the right people from an early stage. And I think that's where we've done well together.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see. I think as an industry, certainly when I joined, it's changed massively, and it is about collaboration. It's being open and honest with your partners and actually working at, like what we have across many different areas of our business and yours, a proper partnership level with multiple relationships. Justin, for example, who's not here today, who leads on the motors with you guys, great relationship. And then you've got the commercial side, and we've got strong relationships at director level. It's really important to have that right across the business. And I think what we feel is, if we've got a question, we know you guys have got the answer, and that's the most important thing, right, when you go into a meeting.
And we know you guys will answer quickly as well.
So I think one of the most important things with automation as well is that there's help available. It can be complex, or it can be unknown to many people in the industry, and that's where we're here to help, whether it's to look at an early set of drawings that Ben might be able to advise on a specification, to one of our technical guys on site saying, well, this is where we need to pull cables, have you thought about this, ask this question, that question. That can be really a load of information to gather. Come and talk to us. That's what we're doing day in, day out. Yeah. That's what we know. That's our bag. That's our bread and butter.
Yeah. So make sure you come and speak to us about it. We don't expect you to know everything. At the end of the day, no one person can go and have a client meeting and answer all the questions. Involve the experts, right?
100%. And there's power in that collaboration.
Power in collaboration for sure. And that's an important word, collaboration.
Yeah. It's been a great conversation today, guys. Thank you so much. So if people want to know more, where do they go? Who do they get in touch with? Good question, Harry. The best point of contact in terms of early projects and discussions is Ben. So Ben's looking at projects from very, very early stage. So we'll put the details in the captions below. Reach out to Ben, either via LinkedIn or mobile. Somfy Projects LinkedIn is always a good place to check. There's a lot of good content there around automation and the benefits. Or feel free just to drop us a message. We're more than happy to help and support.
Yeah, and to echo that, we are here to support the industry, whether it's on-site assistance, whether it's working with the web tool to actually provide a set of data around the benefits of automated shading. We are here to support, so yeah, please feel free to reach out to us for any new inquiries.
Awesome, yeah, thank you very much, guys. And of course, you can reach out to the team at Umbra for a wider view on all the things like fabrics, fabric performance, and then how they interact with the automation element as well. So make sure you stay tuned, follow these guys on social media as well, because you'll keep in touch with the latest coming from Somfy and Umbra.